Hi, I'm Chris Swank. I'm the OER librarian here at Pima Community College, and we want to welcome you to our virtual space for this OER Azona conference. We're continuing the discussion with Eddie Watson, who is the Vice President for Digital Innovation at the AAC&U. And if you were in the keynote address, you probably have lots of questions. Dr. Watson is going to start off, Eddie, with about 10 minutes of more comments. You can type your questions into the chat box, and we can read them to him after he's done with his comments. And I hand it over to you, Eddie.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, not more than 10 minutes, I promise. So I just really want to highlight an additional resource that we've created at the American Association of Colleges and Universities, AAC&U. It's a publication of sorts called Making the Case for Open Educational Resources, as you might imagine. It's an OER freely available online. So if you Google that title, or if you go to the AAC&U website and click publications, you'll see it listed there and you can just download it. So why did we do this, and what are the elements? So this is what it looks like there on the screen. But I guess why I wanted to take just a few minutes here was to kind of highlight that this publication exists, talk about, some ways that you might leverage this on your campus, highlight some of the key sort of elements from the publication, and then to see what questions you might have about the publication or anything else that I talked a bit about in the keynote today. So what sort of got us going down the road of making this publication called Making the Case for OER? As we did a survey, it was funded by the Hewlett Foundation across sort of higher ed OER experts, looking really at many of those that participated in our institute on OER, Open Educational Resources. And there was broad agreement that, at this point, it's not enough to just say, hey, these things are free and that everyone can use them and that they're high quality, but that there needs to be an evidence base with a broad argument for why a campus would want to have that commitment to OER. So, it's often a challenge to kind of locate articles that will help the argument or help illustrate a specific point. So we kind of got a sense of like what are the key things that people wanted to talk about, or what are the advocacy strategies or advocacy points that they make on their campus. And then we did the research and pulled it together into a publication. Now, the publication is not like a traditional lit review. We did a lit review predating it, but what we did is we selectively pulled forward articles and data that would be helpful for you in making the advocacy case. In other words, it's not like here's 70 articles on X, but rather here's three really big in, really compelling, really good research methodology that can ultimately serve as a tool case for you. So as you spend some time with the publication, you're going to see that it's written in a conversational tone, and it's not written for your president or provost necessarily. It's written for you as an advocate for OER. So it's kind of like, hey, think about doing it this way, or here's some things that you might leverage. That's really sort of like the overarching approach. What you'll find is that there's lots of graphics in the publication, and it's designed to be dissectable by you and for you to reuse in your own presentations on your own campus or on websites or however you want to use it. You just take it and run with it. Um, we when you go to publications at AAC&U, and if you download this, on the page for the download, you'll see that there's also a page to download a zip file. And the zip file contains high res and low resolution versions of all of the graphics. So all of the charts and tables and stuff, you've already got versions. So in other words, rather than having to do like screen grabs and cutting, cut things out with Photoshop or whatever it might be, we've tried to make this process easy for you. You can go there, download the publication, download this zip file with, a couple dozen images, and then use them at however it would make sense for you to use them. I'm not going to go into sort of like every last thing that we cover, but we have sort of different areas. You saw this graphic in my first hour with you. Basically it's in an area called, why use OER, really focusing on cost and student behaviors. And so what do we know about students and textbook purchasing? And also, if you don't, those that buy textbooks, what have been some of the other choices they've made, such as, you know, did you forego a meal? Did you skip a meal? And 1 in 10 students reported a couple of years ago that, yeah, they chose not to eat so that they could have a textbook at one point. Some students reported working more hours. So like these kinds of stats, it's not just about saving students money, but rather students engage in other behaviors that harm their own health or harm their educative path. If you're working more hours, that those are hours you're not spending studying, or maybe even time that you would have been in class. So basically making sort of a broader argument very clearly with just sort of clean graphics. And of course, knowing the academic world that we're in, everything has a citation associated with it. Um, just more on costs and behaviors. Most students say that they have indeed skipped buying a required textbook. And so that's not just students that are Pell eligible. This is everyone, which suggests there's an array of reasons why students might may not buy textbooks. And then we know that if you don't have the textbook, it's going to negatively impact your end of course grade. We've got different studies, including the one that I led, regarding DFW rates, um, looking specifically at a group of community colleges and what happens when students are in a path where they have a lot of OER. If you're in a semester where you've got 4 or 5 classes using OER, you're actually more likely to take more hours because you can actually pay for an extra course when you're not having to pay several $100s in textbook fees. So there's lots of outcomes like this that can be part of sort of your advocacy strategy. And again, all of these graphics on the screen are available for you to download freely. There's comparisons about first gen students versus non first gen students, those that are on financial aid versus having financial aid. Um, you know, do students feel like they failed a class because of textbook costs? And some ethnicities do feel that textbooks have negatively impacted them so much so that they failed classes. So, thinking about if you're an HSI institution, there's data for these specific subpopulations. You saw these graphics earlier about more equitable outcomes in terms of end of course grades. So yeah, if you go to, I think someone, maybe it was Chris, already posted the link into the chat window where you can go and download this. But we have another publication called Leveraging Open Educational Resources to Advance Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It's really kind of an adopters and a change agent's guide, if you will, for doing some of this work on your campus. And I really did keep it under 10 minutes. I'm proud of myself. It was 9 minutes. So at this point, love to just open up. More than happy to talk more about this publication. Again, it's not like a tome of 400 pages. It's a pretty brief publication, again, with everything downloadable so that you can run with it. But more than happy to talk about that or anything I shared about OER, maybe the Hewlett study that I mentioned that we're nearing the end and things are looking good for that. But also happy to talk about my book, Teaching with AI, and what I'm seeing within the artificial intelligence sphere. So many topics
Wonderful.
we could talk about over the next 20 minutes.
While people are typing their questions, I just want to comment that I did download the Making the Case for OER when you first released it. I was so happy to see community college statistics in there because every time I present a study from a university, some administrator at my institution will go, "Oh, but that's universities,"
Yes.
as if our
Everybody
students
wants to
are,
see themselves in the data, right? They want to
yes,
see
yes,
this is
exactly.
us.
So I
So
think the making the case is really quite wonderful for having the community college, and I'm looking forward to reading your book on AI because that's a challenge for all of us.
thanks.
All right. So far, are anybody having problems with the chat? I don't see any questions in there, but I'll just let you keep talking about what's interesting to you.
Well, it's interesting just how rapidly things are changing. I mean, part of it is some of the rapidly shifting landscape at the federal level that I think a lot of us are sort of like trying to swim upstream in how, what this means for us and our students and our work and our scholarship. So it is definitely unique times, and I, yeah, I have. There's an instinct that I am able to battle back. And it's sort of like wanting to kind of put my head in the sand sometimes, like, geez, there's just so much right now. But there's so much noise, and sometimes things that are really impactful to us kind of go under the radar, like this call from the NSF right now, basically looking for guidance regarding the strategy that they're going to develop that seems to be very pro AI. I mean, I mean, entirely pro AI. I guess in the same way, I mean, I wasn't alive in the 50s following Sputnik, but I imagine there was a very similar charge for doing STEM and moving barriers and the like. And I feel like that's might be where we are with AI. But I think voices that for us to use our voice, and actually AAC&U is going to be working with an array of other large associations like ACE and others to put forward a statement to recognize this is maybe a Sputnik moment, and we do need to accelerate some of our work within the AI space. I think which might speak to education, but it also speaks to ethics. And I don't think that we throw out the notion of intellectual property in favor of this AI arms race that's emerging. Um, so I think we have a moment where we can use our voices to share with those that are making the next generation of policy and governance plans, um, what we feel is important regarding this emerging AI landscape, like speaking about the environment, speaking about ethics, speaking about overarching governance, speaking about the value of IP. Yeah, this is the moment. This is the window, because the plan will be put together and then implemented quickly following that. So we have what, 3 weeks or just under 3 weeks? Actually, wait, 2 weeks because it's February only has 28. Yeah,
Okay, I'm getting some things in here. First,
good.
Allegria says that it's a most amazing book, life changing. I think that's the making the case for OER. So there you go. Um, I got a message from Chelsea that is asking for tips for teaching with AI in the classroom. Specifically, how do we discuss ethics with students?
Yeah, I think it varies from one discipline to the next. Like I think that there's times where having a note-taking app might be really smart. Like I could see in like in the courtroom, how that might not be seen as unethical. You already got a stenographer who's capturing everything. But then is it unethical to be using a note-taking app whenever you are with a patient? Like if you are a nurse and you're doing your rounds, should you be using an app there? And like why or why not? So I think that what we're finding is that we're almost having to define what's ethics, and like actually in classroom settings, what is cheating from one assignment to the next, because if you're trying to engender AI literacy skills, well, that means you've got to be using AI most likely. So I think it's the same way with ethics. I think it's within each field, and a lot of the professional associations, pretty much every field you're in, whether you're in biology or philosophy, there's a professional association um, for your discipline. And a lot of the work regarding not only best practice, but what is ethical is coming from those domains. So I think that, you know, my background is I had double degrees in English and statistics as an undergrad, and then got my doctorate in education. And certainly, like groups like AECT and AERA are providing some guidance regarding the ethical use of AI within the context of the discipline and the fields that are represented by the disciplinary work. So my recommendation would be that might be the first place you go, is your professional home. And then if you reach out and they say, well, we're not doing anything in that space, then the follow-up might be, well, why not? I mean, this is work that should be done. And ideally it wouldn't just be one individual, writing down this is what ethics means, but rather a professional association evoking faculty from an array of different institutions and institution types and state contexts, because I think we've seen there's greater diversity from one state to the next now than there used to be, I think largely driven by sort of the political dynamics in one state to the next. So you want to have this huge representation of voice that comes to provide that guidance. The problem is doing that kind of work well isn't quick and easy. So I think that, we might be in a little bit of a window where we're having to push those to do this work rather than it's already in place for us. But yeah, I mean, I think that that is the best place to start as we think about receiving guidance regarding what might be ethical uses of AI within our discipline and the fields that we serve.
I think Pima Community College is convening a cross-functional and cross-departmental group to discuss this issue and maybe come out with a statement for our college.
Yeah, we're
Um,
seeing a lot of task force work across a lot of universities, and it's been very interesting. The diversity of response. Like if you look at like something like the University of Michigan, which they see themselves as very innovation forward, and they really discourage faculty from playing the role of academic integrity police officer. It's about let's run for the flag kind of thing rather than let's think about this. And small liberal arts schools are often those that are more at the other end thinking about ethical concerns and the environment and wait, maybe we need to think about, we acknowledge that this is the future, but how do we do this right where we're not damaging the planet or damaging humanity or damaging our field. So I think there's somewhere in the middle, where things are moving very quickly. And again, we have students who are sitting out in the real world, here in just 3 months. Is there nothing left? Is there not enough time left to do anything for those students? I think that there is. I think in the capstone courses are probably the best place for us to think about investing faculty development opportunities in the very, very, very near future in the next month or so to maybe make April a prepare students for the world that awaits them post graduation kind of thing in those capstone courses. But I guess a lot of topics I've mixed together there, but happy to chat further about any of them.
yeah, I do have some questions rolling in, so let me start with those.
Okay.
Allegria is having some resistance from especially first year writing course instructors for using AI. How do you convince faculty to integrate AI into their lessons?
Well, I think ultimately we in higher ed are really, really good with curricular challenges and pedagogical challenges. And I think the first thing that the way that we can reframe AI that may make it manageable for us is to see it as a curricular challenge. So again, if we agree that AI literacy is something that we want to teach, that students who graduate from our college or university, they should leave with AI literacy, then the question becomes, well, where do we teach it? And so that's an intellectual challenge. That's a curricular, it's sort of a curriculum mapping kind of challenge. Where does this belong within the curriculum? And there are places where it doesn't belong. We're actually having AI in this course. We have other learning outcomes within this course, and AI might be counter to it. Maybe this is the course, or maybe this is the assignment where AI is outlawed. But if we agree that AI is an outcome in the same way that writing might be a learning outcome, or teamwork, or ethics, or critical thinking, or integrative knowledge, if all of those kinds of great outcomes that we have for many of our courses, then the question is, where do we teach those? And I think that
Huh.
for those,
Wow. Period. Big news.
so I think we figure out where we put it in the curriculum. And within the curriculum, that doesn't mean that everybody's teaching it. It means that maybe within our major, well, these are the three courses where it belongs.
Mm,
Okay, well, then those that are teaching those three courses, well, then we need to help them solve the pedagogical challenge. So first it's the curricular challenge. Okay, it belongs in these three courses, not in every course. Okay, in those three courses, do students have access to the tools? Does the faculty have the training and support? Maybe the faculty member needs a budget to have the ability to buy licenses for software for themselves if the institution hasn't provided that in the same way that we might have travel budget or research budgets. Maybe there's a AI tool access budget. That's not the best name for it, but you could call it something like that. So then it becomes a pedagogical challenge. Now it's within the class. So I think that, you know, teaching writing may not be the best place to, those courses may not be the best place to try to engender AI literacy. It might be, it may not be. I'm not a writing professor, but I think it's like, faculty own the curriculum. So I think, within a department or thinking about gen ed or thinking about the broader university, make those, answer the question first. Do we believe this is the future? Do we need to prepare our students with this? And if the answer is yes, then it's a curricular problem. Where do we place it? Where do we teach it? Okay, it's these courses. Then, okay, how do we help these faculty ensure that they have the resources and the pedagogical expertise to make the changes associated with it? So we're really good at curricular challenges. We're really good at pedagogical challenges. But I think that there's a sense that's like, wow, this is overwhelming, and wow, this is the future, and this is disrupting my discipline, or maybe destroying parts of my discipline that I love. And it's like, probably not. It probably just need to figure out where we teach it. And then there's other things that we want to preserve, maybe because we love that part of our discipline, or maybe it's because we have other learning outcomes that can best be achieved by students not having AI. I mean, it's hard to become a really good writer if you don't have opportunities to write. And if AI circumvents that process, then maybe AI doesn't belong in that context. But then it becomes a question of an academic integrity set of challenges. Again, now we're down into the weeds of pedagogy. Like, how do we make sure students aren't using AI in my writing class? And there's an array of strategies that exist specifically for that. I'm happy to talk about those a bit as well. I'll give like two really super quick. I mean, research regarding academic integrity shows that if you talk to your students about academic integrity, they're less likely to cheat. And this means in a recurring fashion, like not just on syllabus day on day one of the semester. You have that day one conversation, and then you give a midterm 2 months later. It's as if you never had this conversation. But if you remind your students that there's a purpose to academic integrity, and that integrity values in every aspect of our lives, and we want this to be a fair classroom, and don't talk about it in a mean way, like I'm going to get you kind of thing, but more like it's affirming that we have a set of values that we're going to practice within this class. Students will be less likely to choose to cheat. If you look at the reasons why students cheat, number one reason students cheat is that there was an opportunity. But the other reasons on that list that are high on the list are, I mismanaged my time. And so it was late on a Sunday. And so thing was due 8 a.m. Monday morning. I couldn't get it done. I had no other choice but to cheat, or else, get a zero. But what if, number one, if we didn't have any super high stakes exams or papers, like maybe the highest stakes test we ever give is 10% or 15%, or papers 10 or 15%, like no 30% of your final grade is this. I mean, because students then feel like, if I fail this, I fail the course. If I fail this one assignment over 4 months, I fail the course. But if it's smaller, then they're less likely to choose to cheat. Also, what if we build in some flexibility, like we have in our classes? Let's say there's 5 papers due in my writing class. What if for any 3 out of 5, a student could ask for a 48-hour extension, no questions asked, and no grade penalty? So I mismanaged my time. I watched football all day on Sunday. I'm now trying to do this project. I realize I don't have enough time. Instead of cheating, I'll just, I'll ask for the extra 2 days. No student really wants to cheat. And if they have an off-ramp, they will take the extra time. That means they're doing the work, which means they're learning. So it has the benefit of not just discouraging cheating, but it actually improves student learning within the class. So flexibility, low stakes tests, and talking to them about academic integrity, all of those things help move students. Now, with that said, cheating has existed forever. I can remember the last final exam that I was in as an undergrad. It was a stat class. I looked over at the guy next to me. He had every formula known to man written down the side of his white Nikes. So it's like, the student who's always going to cheat, we're never going to reach. But the last strategy that we want to employ is the one around AI detection, because of all the false positives. I mean, you can ruin someone's life by using those tools. So I say AI detection is off the table for higher ed. Given the data around it, I don't see it as an option for us. But there's a lot of research that provides lots of guidance regarding how we can move forward to greatly diminish the chances that students will choose to cheat.
Awesome. Jenny has a concern with, AI sort of replacing Google, and who knew that Google would become the standard several years ago. But with Google, you got several responses, several million responses. And if you could teach your students how to evaluate those different choices with, subheadings of URLs or that sort of thing. But with AI, it just gives one definitive answer and often doesn't cite that. So any comments on negotiating that change in responses to students' questions?
Yes, AI provides a single definitive answer and also does so very confidently. So even whenever
Pretty
it's
arrogant.
false, yes, it will. And often I will say, if I ask for something factual, I'll just say, "Are you sure?" And then it will repeat and often provide a citation, just like this follow-up question, "Are you sure?" And often it'll say, "My apologies. Under further investigation, I realized that Antigua is not the oldest city in Central America. Rather, it is, so it's there are strategies that we can employ to get better answers or to have it reevaluate itself. But also, there are multiple large language models out there. Having students look at multiple versions of the different um, tools, so ask the same question to two different tools. Do you get the same answer? So, don't trust the single expert, but talk to two experts. And then if the answers don't match, well, then there's some additional thought. It's a whole notion around triangulating, data. And speaking of Google, Google is changing. I mean, many things that you Google now, it will provide an AI response at the top, and it will have links to where it's drawing those sources. But it's usually it'll be just like a smaller box, and it'll show this little show more, and you click that, and then it reveals this really long passage, an AI response to your search. So I rarely use Google anymore. I find because I find that I can ask more refined questions. Like I found that my Google search strategy was to try to get me to a page where I could then answer my question, rather than ask my question via Google, because that wouldn't result in very good search responses. So now I do find that I'm using AI instead of just a good example of this was I had a problem with my car radio recently, and I was trying to figure out, is this a thing I have to go to the dealership for? And I finally asked AI. I was like, "So I'm having this problem," and it said, "Well, you need a firmware update." And I was like, "Yeah, I saw this on the site." I said, can I do that myself?" And it said yes. And I said, "Can you walk me through it?" And it said yes. And it gave me the list of steps. And I went to my car and I walked through, and it downloaded the firmware update, and saved me a couple $100 from the dealership. So it just functions differently. I don't think that Google has gone away. I think that it still has its place, but I think that we're refining our information literacy skills as a result of the new capabilities.
We have time for one last question. It'll have to be kind of a short answer from Joe from Pima College. Hi, Joe. It's about OERs and how often textbooks or even OER textbooks don't cite their sources as consistently as maybe an academic article. And is there any sort of meta layer in OER textbooks where you can have citations kind of pop up? Are there some things that we can leverage in OER textbooks that you can't really with a printed textbook?
I would say probably. So this it's a really interesting notion. I think that you see a lot of OERs and they kind of replicate the structure of a traditional print book, where depending on whether you're using MLA or APA or whatever, they've got, you know, citations at the end. But of course, when you think about the capabilities of PDFs just in itself, there are rollovers and there's, pop-ups and things like that you could build into an OER. I don't know why you couldn't take that kind of approach
Very good.
as you build the document. Probably, yeah.
Unfortunately, we have a hard stop right about now, but I'd like to thank you, Eddie Watson, for spending so much time with us this lovely Thursday morning in Tucson. I hope it's lovely wherever you are, and audience as well, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Watson. Eddie.